High energy in this one. We're going to try to answer this question: how do we know about history? And here are some artifacts from ancient history. And of course, to answer a question can be a mystery. So, we're going to think of history as mystery in this. And of course, mysteries have to be solved by detectives. And who's the most famous detective of all time? Yes, it's Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo is the most famous detective of all time. And at the end of this video, you are going to be Scooby-Doo. So, you are a history detective. What you would look for as a history detective are these particular things. We look at a historical event. You would look at clues, evidence, motive, and suspects. And we're talking about a historical event. We're not necessarily looking at suspects as in a murder mystery. We are looking at people who are involved in that historical event. So,
We interrupt this PowerPoint presentation for a special announcement. This just in from the Reading School Department. All the students in Mr. Bernard's Social Studies class were mistakenly promoted last year from the 5th to the 6th grade. Effective immediately. All students in this class will go to the elementary school starting tomorrow. Sorry for the inconvenience.
okay, who got scared there for a second? Or who was jumping for joy? I'm sure there were different reactions. Some of you probably would like to go back. Some of you probably would not. But how could you prove you were promoted? What could you use to prove that you were promoted? Think about it while I be quiet. Okay, that's enough because we're short on time. Well, you might think of witnesses, and here's a list of people who may be witnesses for your promotion. And you may think of evidence, and here's a list of evidence that may prove of your promotion. Now, what all these are considered when we're thinking about history as mystery, or when we're trying to write history, these witnesses and evidence in regards to your promotion would be sources. Sources to prove your promotion. Now, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I'll just point this out right now. Some of these sources may be more reliable, trustworthy than others. For instance, your principal would be a more reliable source about your promotion than a friend. A friend could, hey, let's face it, lie for you. A promotion certificate may be more reliable than a congratulations card. And that's something we're going to talk about a little bit later. The reliability of sources, the trustworthiness of sources. And a source is a definition, a simple definition here, a point where something begins, okay? Like the source of a river. Now, there are two kinds of sources that we're going to talk about. One is written, and that's written meaning any written language. Doesn't matter what language, any written language. And here are some examples of formats of written languages, what they could be. And then there is non-written sources, and non-written sources are basically broken down into three sub-areas, okay? Fossils, artifacts, and oral traditions. Two types of sources, written and non-written. Now, written sources can be written about any particular event, and it would have some type of language on it. This is the Rosetta Stone, which happens to have 3 different languages on it. And this is Hammurabi's Code, a king from ancient Mesopotamia who developed a law code, and he wrote it on this, what is called a stele or stela, in which is one large piece of rock. Okay, non-written sources. The first type or subgroup are fossils, and fossils can be remains or imprints of any plant or animal. This happens to be the imprint of a crayfish in a stone. This happens to be the fossils of an early human which was nicknamed Lucy. Now, it's important to remember that these are not bones. They are replicas, stone replicas, of the bones of Lucy. So, fossils are bones turned to stone. 2. Second subsection is artifacts of non-written sources. Now, the key in this definition is made or modified. These are rocks that have been modified into tools by people, ancient human beings, or our early ancestors. Okay, and what they do is they take a rock like this, and they take a second rock, and just hit it and chip away the edges to make it sharp and turn it into anything from an arrowhead to a cutting tool. These are pots, and they are made from clay, and these are human-made. So we have modified and made artifacts. 3, oral traditions. And these are passed on stories that are just told word of mouth. Native Americans are a good example. They have many oral traditions. And some people say that oral traditions cannot be trustworthy as to their accuracy, but actually they do tell us a lot, though, about the beliefs of that culture and the myths and legends of that culture. So, as I said with the principal as opposed to the friend and the promotion certificate as opposed to the congratulation card, we have to evaluate sources. How accurate and useful are they? And the first thing we have to decide as to evaluating them is, are they a primary source or are they a secondary source? Now, why do you think there's two different kinds? Do the names tell us something about why there are two different kinds? Well, the names would. So if you pause it here and think of it for a second, you might come up with some ideas why one is primary and one is secondary when we're evaluating a source. Moving on. Primary sources come first in time. They are created at the time of the event. Okay? The Hammurabi stele or Hammurabi's code would be a primary source about Hammurabi. Secondary source came second by studying the primary sources. So, somebody studies Hammurabi's code and writes a book about it. The book would be the secondary source. And that's exactly what we're going to look at here. Here are some primary sources. Again, the stele of Hammurabi and the Rosetta Stone. Recorded, if we're studying about these time periods, these would be primary sources. Secondary source would be books written about those primary sources. And to move very quickly, primary source, the stele of Hammurabi's code, circa 1752 BC, a primary source. A book written about Ham's code in 1950 by studying the primary source. This book would be a secondary source. Moving to the Rosetta Stone. Whoops. Let's go back. The Rosetta Stone, inscribed in circa 196 BC. If we're studying about this time period, that would be a primary source. A book written about the stone in 1991 would be a secondary source. And again, I'm sure this author right here studied the primary source in order to write the secondary source, the book. Okay, so as I said before with the promotion, all sources are different as to the accuracy, so we're going to have to ask some questions about sources. Who created the source? What kind of source is it? When the source was created? Where the source was created? And why it was created? We could ask these questions about your promotion. Okay, we could ask it about the promotion certificate. Who created it? Well, maybe it was the principal. You might say the school district. What kind of source is it? Well, it's a written source. Maybe it has some signatures on it. When was it created? Well, it's a primary source. It was created at the time we're investigating, which is your promotion from the 5th to the 6th grade. Where was the source created? Well, it was created in Reading, Massachusetts. You might say it was created at the school. Why was the source created? Well, it's very direct. It was created to prove your promotion. So when we're evaluating sources, we can take it a step further and we can make some inferences about that source. What does it tell us about the time period, the event, or the person? Now, when you make inferences, you're making observations or you're drawing conclusions by considering the source. So let's try that with some examples. And let's do this thing. So here's the first one. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. It's the Lincoln Memorial. Now let's make some inferences about this building. And here's a picture of good old Honest Abe, the statue in the building. But let's pretend like we know nothing about this. We're from some alien planet and we've just beamed down, and this is what we see. What inferences, what observations can we make about this building? Now, there are some obvious ones. Well, it has stairs, it has columns, it's made of stone, it has a statue inside. But we really, when we're making inferences, we want to take it a step further. For instance, well, these stairs are so wide, they must have expected a lot of people to come see this. This building is made of stone, so they wanted to probably make it last for a very long time. It's a very big building, very impressive with these columns. So it must have been something very important that this building represents. Now, if we could get a picture of a person standing next to this, we'd see that this statue is about 3 times the size of good old Abe himself in real life. And he's on a pedestal, so this is sitting up higher. So when we're looking, if you're standing here, you have to look up at him. So you might say, you know what, this statue is pretty imposing. He's looking down at us. He's 3 times the size of us. He's sitting on like a throne. Whatever this person did, they must have done something very important. Back to the columns. I'd think my inference would be, where did they get this idea to build this building like this? Is it their original or their own idea, or did they get it from somebody else? And I'll tip you off, we got this idea from somebody else. Does anybody know where we got this idea of building columns and making this memorial look like this? Another part or inference we could make is up here is written all the states, or they have all these names of different places. All these places must have something to do with the building, so all these places must be connected in some way, and this building must represent their ideas or their ideal for why they built this building. So pause, add some more inferences yourself, and write them down. Pause this at any time. I'm moving on to the next slide, and we can do the same thing. Here's a statue. Make inferences about it. Write it down. The who, what, when, where, and how, and why. About why this statue was made, why it was put where it's put, what it means to the people who built it. Pause and do that. I'm moving on now. Here's a ancient artifact from Mesopotamia, and you can see the size of it here. It's a box, and it has pictures on this side, and it has pictures on the other side. I'm going to show you a couple more pictures. Here's one side of the box. It has certain pictures. It depicts a certain scene, you might say. What do you see? What inferences or observations can you make from these pictures? And take it that step further, not just what you see, but what you can infer from it. And here's the other side. This is a totally different scene, so I'd ask you, why 2 different scenes? What does this scene represent as opposed to this scene? Why is the box made so small? Why is it a box? Inferences, people. Inferences. Draw conclusions. Make observations. Write them down. Here's another one. A statue from an ancient civilization. We've got a 3-headed dog over here. Whoa. What's this on this guy's head? Why has he got this long staff? And of course, he's missing an arm. That's just damage. He did have 2 arms at one point. Make some observations. Here's a tough one. You will never be able to do this. Here's a person that gives you perspective as to how tall this is. Whoa, that's pretty big. And here is a close-up of the writing on it. What was its purpose? Why was it built? Where was it built? Who built it? Observation, inferences about this. And lastly, this picture here. What's it tell us about the people? Make some inferences. I gotta end it now. Not bad. 14 minutes and about 20 seconds. This is Mr. Bernard signing out.